During the initial rehab, they really just focus on getting a patient home safely.
Yes, they're surviving.
Right?
Ask them, how are you today? And you would say, fine.
Yeah.
Does that mean you're fine? No.
People that used to call, people that used to come around, they just don't anymore. And it's normal that people's lives go on, they've got their own things, they've rendered their support.
The penny hasn't dropped that this is something that's not going to go away.
100%. Survivors and families will focus on, we need to get to therapy, physio, occupational, speech therapy, let's go. And they often neglect dealing with the emotions around that.
People pray that their loved one survives. And many, many times people have told me, I've prayed for this person to survive. And now, yeah.
Welcome to Fill in the Blanks podcast. I'm Ilanie, and today I've got Cindy from BrainLife. I'm so excited to empower families today with what Cindy and BrainLife are doing after traumatic brain injury rehabilitation. Welcome, Cindy. We're so happy to have you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. Cindy, so I always like to start with just tell us a little bit more about yourself and your why around BrainLife.
So I'm a speech therapist by profession. I worked in rehab for many years, and the longer I worked there, the more I realized that as clinicians, we are so focused on that acute phase of rehabilitation that we forget to look up and see that this is only really the start of people's journey, and that when the penny really drops, when the difficulties really crystallize, or when people go home, and then unfortunately there's very, very little support.
Yeah.
So BrainLife was born from that realization and just the feeling that, there needs to be long-term support for people living with brain injuries. It grew out of that idea. We initially partnered with another organization in Johannesburg, but eventually the geography makes it a bit difficult here. Not far, but it is far.
For sure.
And we've been going for almost 14 years now, and yes, the goal is really long-term support for both people living with brain injuries as well as their family members and loved ones.
Yeah. So throughout March, we've really spoken about brain injury awareness, the acute rehabilitation, and then going home. And BrainLife really makes a huge difference. Like Cindy mentioned, there isn't a lot of resources available for after discharge, but that really is when reality sets in. Right, Cindy. So tell us a little bit about the program. What does BrainLife offer?
Okay, so I would say the cornerstone of what we do is a group rehabilitation program. So people, we're not a stay-in facility. Survivors come to us for the day. And during the day, there are multiple different rehabilitation groups. So it would be a physical group with either maybe a biokineticist or a physiotherapist. We have music therapists, which their sessions are loved.
Yeah.
I always feel a bit jealous because as the speech therapists usually manage the cognitive therapy.
Yeah.
I have to work really hard for people to have fun, but the music therapist she just turns up with her guitar,
Yeah.
and everybody has a great time. And then usually we end the day with arts and crafts as facilitated by one of our occupational therapists. So that's kind of the cornerstone of what we do. The goal is for people to actively participate in therapeutic activities for the whole day.
Yeah.
So if somebody has to or wants to walk better, they're walking the whole day.
Yes.
If they are struggling to communicate, they're in a situation where they need to communicate the whole day. And then on top of that, also many times in the longer term, people in families with brain injuries are very isolated.
Yeah.
For many of the members that come to our groups, it's the only day of the week that they get out of their houses.
Yeah.
So people make new friends. They kind of find a space where they belong. And what I've seen, I think you as a social worker knows this, but what I've learned is that when people feel better, they do better.
Yeah.
So it's motivating seeing your friends doing something. You believe, but I can do it as well. So oftentimes people would come in wheelchairs, and then the next time they say, no, but I'm going to bring my walking frame.
Yes.
Or people that really struggle to communicate are in a situation where there's space for them to try, and that really makes all the difference. So that's the group therapy program. We then also have individual counseling, both for survivors and their families, which is managed by our social worker and her team of volunteer counselors. We also, you would know that brain injury has a huge impact on people's finances as well, especially when it's a breadwinner. I always tell people I've been working since 2002.
Yeah.
And in this field, and in all that time, I think I don't even need one hand to count the families where brain injury didn't really alter their financial capacity. Even when people are prepared, they're not as prepared as they should be for daily. And some people don't have the luxury of being prepared because they're already living month to month.
Yeah.
So it has a huge impact on people's finances. And we also do food support for about 58 families that either weekly or every fortnight or every 3 weeks would receive food parcels. You also have a skills development project, and we run a little second-hand shop in Mamelodi where our survivors work. It's their business. Everything we make goes 100% of the income, even the profit, but 100% of the income of that project goes to the survivors themselves.
Wow.
So in a nutshell, that's basically what BrainLife does. Last year we were involved in a lot of education. So it could either be going to schools coming to us, businesses volunteering, and they also, we host a lot of students from the University of Pretoria. So the idea is just to spread the word. We really believe that if people understood brain injury a little bit better, that's just going to make it much easier for survivors and families to reintegrate as best as possible.
Yeah. Because Cindy, I think coming out of neurorehabilitation as well, I think, it's a traumatic event people go through. Is my loved one going to survive or not?
Yes.
Then they survive. They go through inpatient rehabilitation, right? They're very focused on how do I get my loved one home safely? What now? Like you mentioned, oftentimes people don't return to work immediately or ever, right? So especially with your more severe cases, and that has a massive impact on the family system. But during the initial rehab, they really just focus on getting a patient home safely.
Yes, they're surviving.
Right?
And the penny hasn't dropped that this is something that's not going to go away.
100%.
It takes time for people to kind of grasp, especially with significant brain injuries, that this is forever.
And that makes the home reintegration difficult, right? Because both survivors and families often don't realize yet how much their lives have changed. And oftentimes they think if we just get home, if my loved one is just home,
It's going to be okay.
it's going to be okay. And with okay, they mean life's going to resume as normal, the way it was before, right? And oftentimes that's not the case. You guys are a non-profit organization, right? Where an organization like BrainLife really can step in when families and survivors don't know where to go. I'm sure oftentimes people come knocking that their backs are against the wall. They're not coping at home.
Yeah,
And they don't know where to go. Is that correct?
definitely. I think that generally people have resources. It also depends on where you come from, the resources you have. But let's say you have the resources to have private healthcare. Initially, there's support available, whether it's clinicians, but also family and friends. People bring a casserole, but the reality is that life goes on.
Yeah.
And slowly, the people around you go on with their lives, and it's kind of this nucleus family left with rebuilding their lives.
Yeah.
And as you said, I think it takes a long time for people to realize that life is not gonna return to what it was before. I always kind of think about, as you said, people pray that their loved ones survives. And many, many times people have told me, I've prayed for this person to survive. And now they're here, but it's not the same person. What's the word in English? Rou.
Yeah, they grieve, right?
So you have to kind of grieve for the person that you've lost. while at the same time learning to live with and love the person that's there. And unfortunately, many of the symptoms of a brain injury doesn't make for an easy relationship.
For sure.
It can be really hard. Sure. Yeah. So I think the realities take time to develop. And it's really unfortunate that when families need support most, there's a void.
And really isn't 100%. So I also really realized that in inpatient rehab I realized a couple of things. The first thing was obviously that families are not realizing yet
No.
that there's a whole journey ahead, that the expectation is as soon as we get home, things are just going to be the
It's
same.
going to take time. You don't also have a concept of what that time is.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's going to be okay.
Exactly. And the second thing was exactly there's so much support in hospital, in the acute hospital, in rehabilitation, and to an extent post rehabilitation when they're still in that program.
Yes.
But that also ends.
Slowly but surely.
Yeah. And something that you really touched on that's close to my heart as well is the social isolation, because due to the significant life change that, an acquired brain injury creates, people do bring casseroles, they come around, but family members have often told me, people that used to call, people that used to come around, they just don't anymore. And it's normal that people's lives go on, they've got their own things, they've rendered their support, and now they're moving on.
There's something else I think that also comes into play with that, is that brain injuries are difficult to understand. It's gray. We are not, as humans, very comfortable with things that we don't understand. So brain injuries are inherently very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
People don't know what to say. They don't know how to act. The survivor may be a bit odd.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think people just really don't know how to deal with the situation oftentimes. And I think that's why something like this is so important, because if people understand better, they'll do better.
For sure.
Then don't do better, that's on there.
For sure.
But I always tell our group, remember that if you are on the other side, if you would have done the same thing, you would have felt the same way. So what we need to do as a community, whether it's the survivors or the loved ones, or for all of us working in this field, is we really need to take responsibility for creating more awareness.
For sure. For sure. And I think that's what I really love to hear, that you guys are on a mission for empowerment with education. And different people in your community, from schools, businesses, you are targeting different people in the community to educate, because that in the end makes it a bit easier.
Definitely.
If someone has a baseline understanding of what the impact of a brain injury is, if there's a bit more understanding, it makes those interactions a bit easier.
I always kind of say, and it's not even just about brain injury, it's even broader.
Yeah.
A little bit more understanding and compassion for all types of people with different needs, whether it's dementia or whether it's a child with special needs, or and honestly, something really magical happens when people visit, or when we have an opportunity to visit. Just that little bit of interaction, people kind of stretching themselves beyond their comfort level really makes a huge impact. And I really believe that people leave, being better.
For sure.
And that's what we need. We need a community of better people
Yeah.
to support people in need.
For sure. Because I think we often don't speak about how much strain the family members take, right? And they need to go back to work. They need to keep the pot boiling. They need to make sure the kids get to school. And simultaneously deal with the loss, like you mentioned, of how their loved one was before.
Yes.
And now rebuilding their lives, but also trying to fit into a new community, because the old community doesn't necessarily fit anymore. The places they used to go, they don't necessarily go anymore. The friends they had, they don't necessarily have anymore. And I've always said, after specifically a traumatic or acquired brain injury, the recovery process often involves rebuilding a whole life, rebuilding a new community, rebuilding what it looks like to live a meaningful day-to-day life.
Yeah, and I think as a social worker, you are well aware of this, that it really took me a long time to to kind of figure out that it's this journey that family members and loved ones are on is continuous. It's not the place that you reach and now you've made sense of this. It's a continuous journey, and sometimes you go through phases when things go a little bit better, and at other times maybe it's a child that deals with it a little bit better when they're younger, but now they're a teenager and it is really hard. Or a wife that maybe is confronted with retiring, and the white picket fence of their life they should have had is just so tangible. Um, so it's cyclic. It definitely it's not a single process. For sure. So that to me was, as I said, it took me a very long time to understand that.
Yeah, because I think oftentimes the outside world will think, but isn't it time now to kind of adjust, get over it? Why are you still feeling depressed? Why are you still grieving the life you had? Why is it still coming up in conversation that, you are unhappy about this that happened? For the outside world, it might feel like the survivor and the family are stuck, but they're not. They're just going through the different cycles out.
And sometimes it confronts you, anew in a
For sure.
ways.
For sure.
The other thing that I think that I always highlight, especially when we speak to students, or I always kind of ask them, "How are you today?" And you would say, "Fine." Yeah, does that mean you're fine? No. And especially as therapists or as people working in this field, as students that's going to be therapists, I think it's important that we realize that, because you've maybe seen this person in rehab and now they're back after 6 weeks, and you ask, "How are you doing?" And they say, "Okay, you're fine," and we kind of take it at face value, and it doesn't mean at all.
No.
People tend to, I don't want to say hide how difficult it is, but downplay how much they are struggling.
Yeah, for sure.
And sometimes it takes a long time before they are vulnerable enough to say, "Listen, I'm not 100%," or especially behavioral issues.
Especially behavioral issues.
There's a lot of shame, Mike.
Yeah, for sure.
That's
And something that's not necessarily acceptable in society or a little bit more frowned upon from a behavior perspective. I love that BrainLife approaches the program from a holistic perspective, that there is a social work department with counseling for survivors and family members, because I think it's such an important aspect. Oftentimes what I've seen, survivors and families will focus on, we need to get to therapy, physio, occupational, speech therapy, let's go, let's go. And they often neglect dealing with the emotions around that.
But yeah, it's almost, I don't, this word strategy is not the right word, but it's almost a coping mechanism for me, because you kind of just you can deal with the physical stuff, the day-to-day stuff, but you just can't you can't deal with the loss yet.
But it is inevitable.
Yes.
And I think, again, as the process goes, as we go from inpatient rehabilitation, outpatient, getting into a program that BrainLife offers, it's inevitable that families and survivors get confronted with, I need to face my emotions now, come to terms with it, process it. That is a very important puzzle piece in the rebuilding life, right?
I don't know if you have found something similar, but I sometimes feel that survivors that have better insight, they sometimes can tend to be more depressed or sad about the loss, but in a way, they and their loved ones are on the same page, so they can grieve together.
Yeah.
Whereas survivors that have very little insight, these people at BrainLife that will tell me their life is so much better, because there really is an insight issue, and I always feel that their families, I find that they really struggle because they're not even in the same book, never mind on the same page.
And I think those families grieve significantly, right? The ones that they're not on the same page, it's like they're out of reach. The survivor and the family definitely are out of reach. But the families still feel responsible and they still want the best and they still love, but they're almost left to grieve alone.
they almost grieve alone because this person is so far detached from the reality of the situation that, so at least when you are grieving together, is a bond
For sure.
but when, so I do sometimes feel that loved ones that kind of deal with people with very little insight.
Well, they need a lot of support. They need a lot of support. Cindy, tell us a little bit, when and what type of patients do you cater for at
So our focus is on acquired brain injury. So the focus is on people that have lived normal lives and something happened, a motor vehicle accident, stroke, a brain tumor. We do on occasion make space for others, but that's our focus. We focus on adults, but again, we've had people as young as 15 in our groups in certain circumstances. And really anybody in the Greater Pretoria area that's able to get to the group, even if they're not able to get to the group. This week I spoke to a lady living in Underberg, and I spoke to another lady living in Krugersdorp. So sometimes even just a telephone conversation, that, how are you doing? Are you okay? Just kind of knowing that you're not alone, that there's other people that's going through the same thing, or even if it's just that. So our doors are open.
Great.
And we always suggest that people come and visit, check it out, and maybe we're a resource that's the right fit for them.
Yeah, for sure. And lastly, Cindy, so BrainLife is a nonprofit. Someone might be watching this podcast and they really want to get involved. They want to contribute. They want to partner with BrainLife from a business perspective. How can they reach you? Is that a possibility? Maybe you can just share a bit more on that.
Yes, we're an NGO, so we are self-funded. We don't get support from government, so we apply to businesses and we reach out to whoever. We've got a little program where people can select to donate 100 Rand a month. Yeah. Those small individual donors help a lot because it's something that we can count on.
Yeah.
Businesses, we are a registered NGO, we are a PBO.
Yeah.
We represent the demographics of South Africa. Yeah. So we are always interested in partnering with anybody. They can find us on Facebook, on Instagram. They can Google BrainLife and they'll get our website. So anybody that I always tell people, we live in a time and a place where we all need to work together to build South Africa. We can't wait for government. We can't wait for somebody else. So find a cause that presses on your heart and get involved. And if we happen to be that cause, we are very happy to welcome you into, come and visit. Come
For sure.
Yeah.
So are we going to link BrainLife's details in the bio so that you can reach out? I'm sure a lot of people will really resonate with the work that you are doing. And again, Cindy, there's not a lot of people that have the heart for the aftercare, the after the fact, the, beautifully packaged, go home, all the best, where the pawpaw hits the fan, and you guys actually help to pick up that pieces.
Yes, right. And that's really where I think more support is needed.
For sure.
Especially, as you said, that's where the pawpaw hits the fan. That's when reality settles in. And that's where survivors and families really need and deserve a lot better from us.
And the beautiful thing is, it is available. It is available. It's just that people need to know about it. And I think sometimes just taking that step to actually come visit, to come for that first session,
Just pop in and see and check it out.
For sure. So as a last note, Cindy, let's say a family member is watching. They've had a relative, loved one, a survivor going through the process. They're considering coming. What is a word that you'd like to leave with them? They feel a bit hesitant. They feel a bit anxious. Just what would you like them to know to take this step?
I think the most important thing is to realize, even though it feels as though you are battling this alone, there's a huge community, and the only people that can really understand are other people that has gone through this process. So you're always welcome at BrainLife. You don't have to commit to anything. You can literally just come along, check it out, stay for the morning, visit a few times, and maybe this is something that helps the survivor improve their quality of life, but that also helps you. And you can join a community of people that understand what you are going through. So please come and visit. Maybe we are your cup of tea, and we will be very happy to welcome you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Cindy. So, this is Fill in the Blanks. I think this was a profound episode. I really hope that this touched someone's life. Again, we're going to link the details in the bio. Reach out to BrainLife. Let's change lives. Let's help family members and survivors after sustaining a brain injury to understand that there's life after brain injury. Catch us same time, same place next week.